Okay, and then Lauren, remind me how I get this stupid thing to not show this way. You know?
No. Use slideshow. Yep, this should be there.
What happens is it hides it at the top and I can't see that. So, okay, please apologize for that. All rise, please, for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay. So, can I get a motion to approve the minutes from the meeting of January 12th, 2021?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any discussion, amendments, questions? Nope. Okay. All in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, minutes are approved. Okay, real quick, first Selectmen women's update. Let me get past, we have a long agenda. First of all, I just wanted to highlight and say thank you to my colleagues. The Board of Selectmen issued a statement about the events on January 6th. And so I won't read the full statement, but I wanted to go into the record. And it's also available on the town website. So if anybody wants to read it, but I appreciate us all working together in a bipartisan fashion and just issuing some sort of statement to reflect all our sentiment about the events on January 6th. And then next item is really, I just wanted to give an update on the vaccine rollout, which I know has been a bit traumatic, to say the least, for some individuals trying to get access to the system and get appointments. And there really has been a shift over the last couple of weeks from what was originally thought to be a plan by the state to handle a lot of the vaccinations for the general public. It was going to be handled more through pharmacies and other avenues, and now it's really getting pushed down into the town level. And then there was a shift of prioritizing those who are eligible under Phase 1B to focus exclusively almost on 75 years and older, which is the most vulnerable population, has been really the hardest hit with the pandemic. And so with that, the town has had to pivot once again, not panic, but pivot to address this need. And so we are working in close consultation with 5 towns, Guilford, Brantford, North Brantford, and East Haven, to roll out this vaccinating plan. And we're hoping to do weekly clinics in each of our communities. So Guilford actually held their first today successfully. Ours is going to be this Thursday. Unfortunately, we cannot limit people. We cannot limit these clinics to residents only. And so this is basically us hosting a clinic in Madison, but it goes into the VAM system, which is the federal vaccine administration system. And then it goes live. And so I have tried to give the community a heads up, which I launched a voicemail on Sunday to those who subscribe to our vaccine survey, to give them a heads up that this was going to be going live at noon today. And so those people could jump on it perhaps and try to snap up the appointments available in Madison. Unfortunately, VAMS is overwhelmed. And so I know that people were very frustrated. They couldn't get into the system and they couldn't see the Madison clinic until probably like between 3:30 and 4 o'clock this afternoon. So we've received hundreds of phone calls over the last couple of days because of this. And I can assure you that we are doing everything we can to be ready. The town is ready. The clinic is planned. I was actually just attending earlier a swearing in for many of the volunteers that are going to be working in Madison on these clinics. We're just right now, the bottleneck is really this system that the state of Connecticut is requiring that we use, the vaccine administration management system. And I think one of the most difficult things about this is it requires you to have an email. And many people in this age category that we're targeting right now do not have emails, or just, have trouble accessing the internet or using web-based portals. So our senior center has also been overwhelmed with phone calls, and I have to give Austin Hall and his team a huge amount of credit. They are being as responsive as possible. They're helping people get into VAMs, get registered in VAMs. We're also going to be setting up clinics to just help people get into the system. So one-on-one appointments, and more information will come out for that. And in the meantime, stay patient. We don't want anybody to think they're not going to get access to a vaccine. Eventually, everybody will get vaccinated. And so we are going to do our best to make sure that everybody in town, especially those who have limited resources or do not have maybe support of family, because I know a lot of people, including myself and other people on this call, they're helping their parents work the system to get registered and vaccinated. And so we want to just make sure that everybody has access to resources to do so. Right now, our clinics are going to be hosted on Thursdays, but they are very much limited by supply. And so we are assured that Thursdays will be fine. We hope to have one next week. It may not be next week. It might be the following week. But as we get more information, we'll let the public know. So I know this is very, frustrating for many people, but the town is trying to give as much information as possible and to help partner with people in the community to make sure that they get what they need. And so, stay tuned. And I do encourage people to continue to check the Senior Center website, also to sign up for that vaccine survey, because I am sending out robocalls with information. I think we have over 2,000 people that actually answered the survey, which is incredible. That we'll continue to share information as we know it. The other thing I do want to point out is I know transportation is a problem, that 9-Town Transit, I don't have the number listed here, but that is available on our website also, is willing to come and pick you up and take you to a vaccination clinic through a range of towns, not just Madison, but Clinton and anything along the shoreline, basically. And then we are working on getting our senior center buses up and running, because part of this is we also have to vaccinate the people that work with seniors. And that's part of the condition of being volunteers. So we just need to make sure that we have the right people doing this type of work to work with seniors. So that is kind of my update on vaccines. And so with that, I would like to just turn it over to Selectmen comments and liaison reports. Anybody have anything to share tonight? I guess, actually, just real quick, I will say, we have met with, we are going through our budget process. So with the Board of Finance, we held joint workshops this week. And so there'll be more information on the budget for the next fiscal year. But we've been working closely with the Board of Finance on that. And, that process is fully underway now. So
I think that our lack of reports is just given because we are so busy with everything else going on right now. With budget, with CIP is underway. Facility study review is underway. We're in the process of putting together a committee for affordable housing to look at affordable housing opportunities within Madison. So don't take our silence as that we're not doing anything.
Mm-hmm. I have a report. Okay. I do have a report. So just a couple things. I'm glad, Aaron, you mentioned the facility study, because obviously we've been spending a lot of time with Dave Anderson and Billy McMinn and Sam on the facility study. So we're excited to bring that hopefully to closure in the next couple of weeks and bring that information back to the town. In terms of my liaison assignments, I just wanted to bring forward a couple of fun facts and maybe some points around COVID relative to our library. This is coming from Sunny Scarpa, our director, but we're averaging right now 3,750 items checked out each month, 5,000 items checked out last month. We created 70 new library cards last month, with a monthly average before construction started was 25. We expect this to lead to increased circulation in the upcoming months. We're also offering Chromebooks for checkout, free Wi-Fi, and wireless printing with contactless pickup, which we've seen pictures of that. It's actually quite impressive, the contactless pickup room. COVID reopening update. So just give you a couple bullet points as it relates to our library in general and just state libraries. Currently, 63% of Connecticut libraries are open. Of that number, approximately 45% are appointment only, like our town of Madison, and about 15% are offering computer appointments only. Only about 25% of all Connecticut libraries are offering walk-in services right now. And they're obviously watching the infection rates quite closely and will prepare to offer walk-in services again as soon as possible. I know everybody's interested to get in that beautiful new building. So, and then on the Board of Ed, I know at our last meeting, they did pass their budget and I believe are sending a transmittal letter to the Board of Selectmen. They started at 1.94%. I believe they ended up at somewhere in the neighborhood of 1.4%, which is a $59.3 million budget request. So that will be coming to the Board of Selectmen as we bring forward everything together. End of report.
Okay, very thorough. Learned a lot about the library.
There you go.
Anybody else?
Peggy, if I could just make a comment, while you were giving your presentation on the vaccines, I got a text message and someone's asked me just to let the public know that there are only between 6 and 10 slots available still for Thursday.
Okay. I'm
Maybe
surprised.
one other point. Sorry.
Yeah.
Peggy, maybe just one other point I realized too with CIP that Aaron alluded to earlier. We did vote at our last meeting to approve the CIP, and that will be obviously coming back to the Board of Selectmen to start our budget process now. But the capital program, as it was worked through by the CIP committee, has been voted to approve.
Yeah, the public hearing is actually scheduled tomorrow, I think at 5.
That's right.
So
yeah,
if you have any,
everybody on this call should be there.
Yeah.
Actually, Scott, I'm going to be doing that medical reserve corps training. There was one tonight that I missed for this meeting, and I'm going to do it tomorrow night. So I'm signed up to be one of those volunteers.
Nice. Sounds great, Bruce.
Thanks, Bruce.
Great.
Yeah, CIP public hearing is at 7.
Okay. All right. So I guess let's move on. I have a new item on the agenda tonight. I wanted to, our new state representative, John Michael Parker, had reached out and wanted an opportunity just to introduce himself, obviously, to the board fully and to the public at one of our meetings, but also provide us an update on, what's going on in Hartford. So appreciate that. And I'll turn it over to John Michael.
Thanks, Peggy. Hi, everybody. Can you hear me okay and see me?
Yes.
Great. Thank you for having me tonight. So I wanted to share a few notes from some work that I've been doing and give a little bit of an update. And then, as Peggy said, maybe just discuss a few next steps going forward. So first of all, I just want to share with folks here that, one of the first things I started after being elected and certainly sworn in on the 6th was something of a listening tour. So I've tried to reach out to a lot of folks across our community to get to understand their legislative priorities, their issues, what they're concerned about. I'll just share some of the folks that I've met with in that process, municipal leaders, including many folks in this group here, a lot of town staff, including Dave Anderson, Sam DeBurra, Austin Hall, Stacy Nobitz, Dr. Cook. I've reached out to many of the leaders of our boards and commissions and had great conversations with folks from P&Z, Economic Development, Board of Ed, Conservation Commission, Veterans, Coastal Resiliency, WPCA, Youth and Family Services, and others. And I've also then sort of thought along the lines of community leaders that aren't in town government or maybe in that capacity. So I've had good conversations with Chief Drum, Captain Race, Officer Martin, the head of the union at Madison Police, spoken with folks at Madison Hose #1, working on getting uptown, Chris from EMS, Eileen Banish from the Chamber, and have just put a lot of outreach out to make sure that people know that I'm accessible and really want to know what their concerns are and what we can be working on at the state level. So I share that with you all to say that if there's anyone that you work with, whether they're in town government, they're volunteers, they're local leaders in any way, please either make an introduction, suggest they reach out to me directly, because the best thing that I can do at this point is listen and learn and understand what's important to the community so that I can best represent up in Hartford. So with that said, I want to talk a little bit about what's happening in Hartford. First, just to share in terms of my work, state reps have the chance to serve on 3 committees, and I was very lucky to get on the committees that I asked to join, and those include education and environment and public health. So my background is mostly in education and sort of nonprofit educational management, so I'm really interested in those statewide policies. Certainly, the environment has so many issues that are directly relating to our community here along the shoreline, and I'm excited to work with our Senate Chair, Senator Cohen, on environmental issues specifically as they affect Madison. So that's a committee I'm especially excited about. And then public health is, of course, a critical need across the state and the world right now. And so there's a lot of interesting work happening there. I want to talk briefly about some of the legislative process, and I'm sure the selectmen here know this, but if there are folks listening in that just want to sort of understand how it all works, up in Hartford, we have a chance to take the session to move forward pieces of legislation that are maybe introduced this year or that have been worked on for years, sometimes longer, and over the course of the coming months to improve them through public hearings, through research and data analysis, through good conversations before they get to the point where they're voted on by the full House. So, at this point, we've moved past the first deadline for submitting legislation. I was happy to get a few bills in there. And over the next few months, I'll have a role specifically in those committee bills that I'm serving on. And ultimately, probably come May or June, we'll get to be voting on whatever makes it through to the full House. A few issues that I just thought I'd touch on as quick examples and updates. I started talking to Dave Anderson and some other folks on conservation about wastewater. And after I had great conversations with folks at DEP and also Circa up at UConn, sort of circled back to this point that a great next step that we can take is to make sure this WPCA study happens in Madison and we start to figure out what are the right guidelines here in our community. And so just an example to say, the legislative process has a lot of paths of learning and talking to new folks. And ultimately, I think so much of this is about what we can do locally in the context of preserving our local control over these issues and taking that accountability. And so, I know this board has talked about the WPCA study, and I'm excited to be a supporter of that. If there's anything that I can do in terms of making the connection with DEP. As another thing that came up, so many folks I talked to in this listening tour mentioned this idea of having access to more statewide grants, or really just some way of knowing what's available in sort of a more comprehensive way. So I asked the question about, could we create a statewide grants clearinghouse so that municipalities know all the options that are available? Now, it turns out there's already legislation in place on the books to create such a municipal grants clearinghouse. However, there was never funding appropriated to it. So it sort of has died on the vine in Office of Policy and Management. So this Friday, I'm talking with folks at OPM and OLR to see what we can do in terms of maybe getting that project off the ground this year. And if there's some tech work that could be done so that we could directly, support our municipalities with knowing all the available grants and options there are. So again, just an example of sometimes it turns into legislation. Sometimes there's other work that we can do in terms of advocating for issues that are already out there being worked on and that just need some follow-up. So I'm excited to, continue chasing that down. I'll also briefly note that, a big part of this role is providing constituent services. And so I'm getting a lot of outreach from folks. I'm sure things that you all hear in many ways too, whether it's from teachers or it's from other essential workers or folks that are, passionate advocates about any specific piece of legislation. One thing that my office is able to do is to help folks that are working on unemployment that are sort of getting caught up in the system and need a nudge through. So I've had a few people reach out about that, and we're able to reach out to Department of Labor to get their cases elevated. So that's a service that people can contact me for, certainly. And again, you can refer folks. I want to sort of touch on one other thing, and I know I've been sharing a lot, so I'll happily pause for questions if there's time. But a big conversation recently is around and ongoing is around the executive orders that have been coming out of the governor's office. So as you folks might know, they're coming up on a deadline on February 9th for about 80 executive orders to potentially expire. What the governor today has decided to request is an extension of 2 months to continue these executive orders and the declaration of the emergency. Now, statutorily, he's allowed to ask for up to 6 months extension. So the 2 months is definitely a reasonable compromise. I'll talk more about why I think it's reasonable. But to be clear, there is the law is set up so that a group of 10 legislative leaders could vote to deny that request. Now, I am not one of the 10 legislative leaders. That includes our caucus leaders, the head of the Public Health Committee, since it would be a public health emergency. And I imagine it's likely that that'll be accepted. And so we're likely looking at an extension up until April 20th of the governor's executive powers. So I just want to share a few notes on why I think this is the right direction. First of all, there are so many urgent issues that have not been codified into law beyond the executive orders that would just fall apart if this deadline passed. That includes a lot of the public health issues that we're working on. That includes things like election implementation, given that there are many special elections and municipal elections, everything coming up in the middle of a pandemic. So there just are urgent issues that need to be dealt with currently and that are best suited to executive order, I think. Sort of related to that, separately, a big point, a significant amount of federal funding is dependent on having a public health emergency declared. And so if we drop that, then a lot of the funding that's related to, for instance, supporting schools and municipalities would go away. So that's important to keep in place. I also think it's worth distinguishing that a lot of the things that we're having to deal with right now are sort of better suited to executive order than to the legislative process. So for instance, determining the hours that a restaurant should close, or determining the capacity of a gym at any moment in the phases of COVID reopening. Those are things that the governor, with a lot of input from public health experts, can make decisions on. But to go through the legislative process and to vote on it and to debate on it would be cumbersome, not very efficient or effective, and ultimately would take away the legislature's focus from things we can and should be doing. Primarily, we'll say this year, the budget. And so on that point, I'll note that, the leadership, at least in the Democratic caucus, is, tried to make a very clear line with the governor that we don't want to support a bunch of executive orders that are spending a lot of money, especially if there are appropriations that will fall off after COVID funding runs out. And then if we make a bunch of changes that can't be continued on, that's actually pretty problematic for the agencies and municipalities that would depend on it. So we've said that we will overturn, and the House can be called at any time to vote to overturn any specific order that comes through. So we'll certainly maintain that. And I trust in that our leadership is going to push us in that direction. And I just want to sort of close this point by saying, I think the governor's done a pretty good job of guiding us through this. I think he's being reasonably restrained, again, not asking again for a full 6 months, but for 2 months, and to be able to reassess at that point. And so while I don't vote on this specifically, I'm supportive of what I think our leadership is moving towards. And, we'll certainly help to, keep an oversight on the executive orders that come through, reviewing them all, making sure we're looking at the ones that should be codified into law, moving forward, looking at the ones that might be an overstep that we need to deal with individually. And as you all do all the time, sort of maintaining a real-time sense of how the pandemic is playing out and what we need to do. So the last thing I'll just say is grateful for the chance to share with you all tonight. Again, happy to take some questions. If you'll have me, I'd love to maybe join monthly during sessions so that I could share updates and take questions and ferry back information that's helpful. And I'm certainly accessible to you all and to anyone else that's listening in that has questions or concerns. And my contact information should be available in lots of different places. But it's, I guess for the record, it's johnmichael.parker@cga.ct.gov. And folks can reach out to me there. So that's all that I wanted to share. Peggy, do you think it's appropriate to take any questions?
I mean, if board members have quick questions, I know they can also submit. We got a lot on our agenda tonight, but I do want to help. I do want to highlight that I think the extension is something that I call it a house of cards right now, because everything, the way the whole town is operating, the school district's operating, everything is kind of dependent upon these executive orders right now. So I appreciate the update in terms of what the, discussions are right now, because this is, I wish these things could be decided even earlier so we can plan accordingly based on what changes could happen. But it's good. It's helpful to have that. So, I don't know if, board members feel there's anything right now they want to ask. Bruce, it looks like you want to ask a question.
Just a quick question, John
Yep.
Michael. Thanks for that update. As in your role on the Public Health Committee, are you getting updated on the vaccination strategies and supplies and that, are you in that loop?
So we receive the daily updates that the governor shares. They may be more detailed, and I'm happy to sync up with Peggy in terms of what you're getting, and it could be as simple as forwarding those along if that's helpful. So that's definitely something I like to, or if Bruce, if you're happy to follow up with you there and let you know sort of the status of the information we get. And then we do have conversations with DPH leaders to find out where their updated strategies are. But the truth is, I don't know that it's much more updated than what municipal leaders are getting, as the people that on the ground are really dealing with it.
Sure. Yeah, no, I get the daily releases from the governor's office that anybody can subscribe to. I think what struck me when they opened up the 1B and estimated that was about 1.4 million people that were in that group, and then estimated that they would be getting 40 to 45,000 vaccines a week, and it's 2 vaccines, so it's 2.8 million shots to be administered. And when you divide it into the 45,000, it's a 62-week process. And I'm wondering if that 45,000 if that 45,000 number has any chance of changing, or is that the type of time frame that we should all be thinking about?
I think that a lot of this is going to be what happens at the federal level now, let's face it. And those were estimates that were given out, weeks ago. You have to plan for something. And so my understanding is, you got to plan for something, but the hope is that there's going to be a shift here, and that there's going to be, with ramping up using the Defense Production Act and other things, that we might actually be able to meet different deadlines. I mean, also the federal level, they've said 100 million shots in 100 days or something. I can't. So, all of this is kind of having to come together very quickly, because it's a much different national strategy now, which we did not have before. So.
No, I get that. And I was hoping that John Michael would say, "Oh yeah, no, the number is now, a million vaccines a week are coming into Connecticut, and we're going to be upset."
Wave your magic wand.
Yeah, I wish I could tell you that with more certainty, Bruce. I'm certainly hopeful and agree a lot of this. I understand, I'm hearing the same things you do about the national level, but the governor's office and legislative leaders know that the rollout of 1B has had tons of problems. They've gotten a bunch of flack over it. Hopefully that will lead to improvements in the process. And maybe we're working out the kinks now so that when there's more supply available, we'll do a better job of getting it out to people.
Well, I got to think too, guys, the reality is for 1B and the numbers, Bruce, you were just articulating, there's still a completion of 1A, right? The second shot of 1A that's probably still in that 50,000 a week that they have to complete. So it's probably longer than the time frame you just articulated.
I was leaving that part alone. I wasn't.
I went there.
Well, certainly I think the hope is, there will be a shift and a ramping up, but to be able to at least get, the 75 plus category done in a rapid time frame here in the next month, I think is a huge accomplishment, just because you look statistically at who has been hurt the most, and this is much more deadly for that age group than any other age group. So I do think it was the right strategy to shift gears and focus on that age category. So hopefully, we'll have a better report and about all the funding that's going to be available for towns and stuff coming from the governor, right? At our next meeting in February. So any other questions from the board? No? All right. Well, thank you for your time, and and hopefully people get your email out there and get ready for a lot of questions. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone for your hard work. Really appreciate what you're all doing, and talk to you again soon.
Okay. Thanks. So next on the agenda is actually citizens' comments. Lauren, do we have anybody raising their hand right now?
There is no
40.
one raising their hand. What?
40 people out there.
Yeah.
You got a meeting.
Well, I'm just wondering, are a lot of these people here for the ordinance?
Yeah, I think the fire.
I'm just wondering, we could move that forward because the fleet study, I know people want to spend time talking about that. Would there be a openness if we, somebody make a motion to move up the, I guess I'll make a motion to move up item number 10 to item number 6A, I guess.
I'll second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, great. Let's do that because I know there's a lot of, and I'm sure they've got a lot of other important things to do tonight, although they're welcome to stay for the whole meeting. But I guess, so item number 6A is now discuss and take action to approve proposed revisions to the Code of Ordinances, section 20.5, property tax exemption for volunteer firefighters. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, great. Well, discussion, we talked about this in a previous meeting. This is updating a policy, an ordinance that we have that expands the benefits for our volunteer firefighters. And I think, as we talked about at our other meeting and we had at the public hearing, we're getting a huge bang for our buck. Let's just be honest. We have an incredible amount of volunteers in our community that step up and serve us every day, and we rely heavily on them. And I was quite astounded that the benefits were so minimal in terms of property tax exemption. So there's some changes that we're recommending to the ordinance. This was actually brought to my attention a year ago, and I had hoped to do this a while ago, but this is also contingent upon going to town meeting to finalize, right? Is that correct, Lauren? No. Oh, this wasn't town meeting. That's right. Okay. Yeah, it was just a public hearing. So anyways, we're grateful we can finally get this voted on tonight and get it in motion. So they will all qualify for this for the next fiscal year. So are there any questions the board members have on it or any issues? No? All right. So why don't we go ahead and take a vote then? All in favor of approving the proposed revisions of Code of Ordinances sections 20.5, say aye.
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 All right, motion passes. And thank you for all the firefighters who attended the public hearing and are here today to support this. And we're happy we can move this forward. Okay, is that good, Lauren? All right. Yep. Okay, great. All right, so let's move back to our agenda item number 7. This is, I'd like to invite Bob Myers to come on board, who's the consultant who helped prepare us. We hired through CCM a expert in public vehicles and fleet management. And he's prepared a study that was finalized in December. And he presented to the CIP committee. But I thought it would be helpful for the entire board to see the study. We've all had a chance, copies of it. And I know both Scott and Aaron in their roles on CIP have had a lot of opportunity to hear about this and talk about it. So we'll try to keep this brief, but Bob, if you could just give a quick overview of what you did and then kind of some of your conclusions. And I don't know if John's on as well, Lauren. If you want to invite him up. But Bob, why don't you go ahead and I'll turn it over to you.
Yes, great. Thank you all for having me here tonight. Actually, I think all the 42 people wanted to hear me talk, but I did.
Actually, I should have put you first so they will support putting more money into our fleet.
But anyway, thank you for having me here. Peggy, I appreciate it. I was tasked as a consultant for CCM to go ahead and do an evaluation of the fleet vehicles that are under the responsibility of Public Works. And so I did an independent study. I made some recommendations for replacement schedule and recommendations for future purchases. And how I did that is I met with John a couple times and met with Guy, took a tour of the facilities and looked at mostly vehicles that were there and housed in the garage. I went around to neighboring towns and did an evaluation on what they have so we can have a nice like and kind comparison to the best of our ability of what they do and how they do things, and came up with a report. And hopefully everyone has the report in front of them. If not, I can pull it up on a shared screen. But I'm just going to go through it briefly. I know you have a lot to go through tonight, and I don't want to make you go to midnight tonight, which is not uncommon, is it? But
I think it's just helpful to talk through it. The board, unfortunately, the report is more written form just for the public's benefit, so it's not really helpful to see it on the screen, but it will be available for public review if you want to look at it later. So with that, maybe if you just want to talk through some of your key conclusions, and that would be helpful.
Certainly. I just want to commend first Peggy for bringing me in and giving an independent analysis of the fleet. After looking at it, became pretty obvious to me that there were many, especially the bigger vehicles or heavy vehicles, we call them in our trade, that were really beyond their useful life. And they were really rusted and outwardly they appear to be nice and shiny, but when you start looking a little bit closer, without a massive vehicle inspection, there were quite a few issues and concerns that I had. And I noticed there were a lot of vehicles that have a lot of different name brands, and that does happen over time. And there were a lot of vehicles that were in excess of what the departments and other departments that utilize them in excess. And so what happens when you don't replace vehicles on a normal schedule, you're not sure when you're going to get your next new one. So you tend to keep the old one, and then you keep that one. And so you've got spares for spares for spares, and hope one of them starts when you need it. And sort of that's the snowball that's been rolling along, and sort of the circus act that John's been working under as he's been the director. So I think that the town is in a good position again to move forward, but it's an expensive recommendation. And jumping to the schedule, which for those of you, if you're following along, is on page 6. Again, people will be able to see it. You break down the vehicles into 3 basic categories. You've got your general use, light trucks. You've got your heavy duty trucks, the snowplows. And then you've got your off-road equipment, which is front end loaders and garbage trucks and things like that. And so you just assess them based on American Public Works Association best practices, a lifetime of when they should be taken out of the fleet, or how many miles that they achieve. So it's a simple formula of time or mileage. And then as soon as that a vehicle achieves either one of those, whichever one comes first, it's retired and it's replaced. And so I noticed right away there were some vehicles that were quite old. And the conversation comes up with how much money can we get? And so the policies is really what needs to be driven now. You as a board are policy driven and not operational driven. And so when you have a policy that says we're going to replace a vehicle when it becomes a certain age or certain miles, that's it. And when we dispose of it, this is how we dispose of it. So really it comes down to adhering to a proper schedule of replacement. And in order to adhere to that, to come up with a town policy and adhere to that as well. So you've got a running CIP, you can go out 10, 20 years. Every time Public Works purchases a vehicle or a neighboring department, you can do a spreadsheet out for 20 years and you know when you're going to need to replace it. So on an annual basis, the CIP knows exactly when it comes to vehicles of how much funding is going to be necessary, and they can plan for it well in advance. And what that does again is it removes the operational tendencies of policymakers to start to pick and choose which vehicles should or shouldn't be replaced, or maybe this can go a little bit longer. That's up to the director to be able to manage once those policies are put in place. That was the 30,000.
Yeah, I know it's kind of hard to summarize. I know there's a lot of thinking and detail behind some of your comments. I know one of the things that you included was a peer group analysis about how we are relative to other communities. And if you could just touch on that briefly too.
Certainly. What I did is I reviewed Clinton, East Lyme, and Waterford. I wanted to choose 3 towns that were close by, shoreline towns, as close to size as possible. I wanted to make sure each one of them was touching the ocean at least. And so my basic focus was, how many road miles are they? Towns in Connecticut are snow driven, and New England is snow driven. So a really way to good fund and appropriately decide how many vehicles and whatnot is to look at how many road miles you have, how many vehicles you have, how many plow routes there are, etc. So if you're looking at East Lyme, you have 24 employees versus Madison of 16, Waterford 33 versus 16, average is about 22. Road mileage on all average is about 141, and Clinton has about 131. And the average number of vehicles is 17, and Madison currently has 12. So overall, there's about 5 vehicles compared to your peers that you're short overall for those type of vehicles. And so that's where it comes in, when to replace the vehicles based on age and mileage, and then how many vehicles you should be having. And so that's where my report went, and it just follows best practices. Now, that doesn't mean that's a perfect and absolute science. It really falls down on the onus of the director of public works to manage however he or she feels fits and works best. But on average, with everybody else trying to get to the level of professionalism and things, that's probably a good point to start with.
Yeah, I thought I'd just real quickly share the study, which I think is kind of I don't know how great this is going to show up, but so we can see.
Just hit the bigger button in the upper left-hand corner.
Yeah,
that might.
This is the problem I have on here because.
Oh, that's the report. Do you have the Excel spreadsheet?
No, I couldn't find that for some reason. So, but unfortunately, this is the way. I'm not liking Zoom with some of these changes because it takes it on 2 pages here. It always does this. Okay, I'll stop sharing it. But there's a it's a big spreadsheet, and that's why I think it was really hard to try to summarize that. But I think it really does give a tremendous amount of detail and condition, age, mileage, and what these things are used for. And it was quite astounding when you go through it and look at the age of our vehicles. I was astounded, and really, I think it's funny because I'm just like the public. I'm like, they're freshly painted. So it looks new trucks. Everybody's driving new trucks. And that was kind of my assumption. And I think that yellow paint that we use tends to be a little deceptive. But as I toured the garage myself, and this is right before starting this, and literally, got down and looked underneath, and they were pointing out a lot of the rusting issues and everything else that we're facing. It was quite astounding to see kind of the conditions of a number of our vehicles. I think this report just really supports the fact that we really need to be investing more in our heavy equipment. These are emergency response vehicles. Ultimately, we wouldn't let a fire truck get to this point. And so I think we have a very thoughtful replacement program for those things. And I think we just really need to kind of rethink. And that's part of what our budgeting process is going through right now, is how to get ourselves on a better replacement cycle so that, we're just better prepared and have better equipment for our people to use, and to keep our roads clean and up and running, and the town operating. So, so I don't know.
In the CIP, we actually deliberated a lot about this point, and it was interesting. John actually went back to the drawing board and came back with, what are we calling it, option 2, John? So we had an option 1 and option 2 to deliberate on. Option 2 being maybe a little bit more aggressive in terms of the replacement, and I think we were all in support of that option 2. To really push it along and invest more, to your point. But I think, at least I'm speaking now for Aaron and Justin and I, who were the elected officials on CIP at the time. And, I think we were all sort of flabbergasted with, our vehicles being, 15 years. I think it was 31 vehicles of 15 years or older. Average age was 15 to 19 years old. I mean, it was surprising. So I think it was a good eye opener for us to be dealing with on CIP at the time we did.
And that's great to hear. And if that's the end result. And so the other half of the report is to go back to the beginning and make it a policy and make it a procedure to purchase and stick to it, and then dispose of. Usually get better value. Even if when the time comes, if you dispose of it, your trade-in should be higher than if you run into the ground and you get pennies for metal. And so it's really a great place to be in for the town right now.
And I think that, we've done that with our police vehicles. Our chief, had the foresight to start that a number of, I think when he came here, really, he put us on that type of system, and it served us well because it also just creates a lot more predictability in our budgeting process. And you don't have all those surprises, which this board, just in the year that I've been here, I think we had to do 3 different special appropriations for vehicles that, just failed for one reason or the other. I think 2 of them had blown engines and one other had some other issue with them. So, and these were older vehicles. I don't know if they were all 10 or 12 or 15. I don't recall, but they were they were surprises for us. So, I know, there's, I don't know if there's any questions. I know that, Aaron and Scott have had a chance to really dig into this. Al, this is new to you, and Bruce, this is new to you. I'm sure that also Bob would be happy to answer questions offline too, if you want to kind of dig into the details on this to get more information from the report.
So I do have a couple of questions, Bob. The comparison of towns, was there a reason to leave Guilford off of the list?
Not intentionally. I just chose 3 towns. I live in Waterford. I know East Lyme well. I know the directors and the cooperation and the readiness of getting information back. I was interim director of public works in Clinton for 4 months, and I wrote an extensive report. So I had that information and I knew it was accurate because I did it. And so those are the reasons I chose 3 towns. No offense to Guilford.
Okay. And the recommendation for more vehicles is just based on the average of these 4 towns, is that?
Yeah, the road mileage, the number of employees that they have, and the number of vehicles, and you do an average of it. And you're seeing that there is a shortage in Madison. And when I asked with John, best practices is during a snowstorm for the driver to make one complete circle of their route. And, my internet connection was unstable, so I stopped talking. So, the gold standard, which no one can really achieve, is 2.5 hours. 3 hours is probably the best. I know that in the CIP meeting, some of the members had made comments that they felt like 4 hours at times might have been the length. So that's just very easy to back into that figure to say that it's, if there was some more vehicles in the fleet, the snowplow routes could be reevaluated, reanalyzed, and shortened. And then that way the circular passes would be happening more frequently. It's just basic math.
Okay, just doing the quick ratios. So Waterford and Madison look to be really, really different. But when you take the number of vehicles into the number of miles, the number of employees into the number of miles, the 2 towns look a lot alike on a per mileage basis.
Right.
I'm not sure that the going from 12 to 17 vehicles based on this table is the right way, because that would suggest that Waterford needs to add a significant amount of vehicles as well on an adjusted per mile basis.
It's not a black and white accounting practice that I'm doing. I'm just trying to say that based on similar towns and sizes, road miles that they're responsible for, the number of vehicles they have, and the average time it takes to do a rotation, this is something that you're earmarked for. Just like my replacement schedule, if John wanted to tweak it and newer vehicles that he's buying maybe have longer warranties or shorter warranties, maybe he wants to adjust that time to dispose of by a year or 2. It's always a fluid document, but you've got to have at least a benchmark to look towards. And John might say, we don't need that many vehicles, or we do need more vehicles based on what the guys are saying. Because these vehicles in the snowstorm, they're sitting in these offices of theirs for up to 30 hours straight. And so do they need to be sitting in there that long? Could they have more rotations quicker and more breaks and less fatigue? So, there's a lot of different factors that the report doesn't put in there. I guess being a director of public works, maybe that just comes naturally and I don't put it in writing all the time, but that's my methodology when I approach this.
Okay. In your replacement schedule, you've got a replacement priority column. I don't know, John, if
That's John's.
That's your priority, John?
Yes.
Okay. I think the only other comment I have is I think this recommends that we get out as selectmen and actually lay eyes on these vehicles, and I think that's a great idea. I think that we absolutely need to get out to the barn and take
road test. Going on a road test, Bruce?
Well, there might be a snowstorm tomorrow night, so if anybody wants to ride shotgun, I think John can help coordinate that for you guys. And sit there for 12 hours and see if that needs to be replaced.
I've done that, and after about 15 minutes, I'm over it and ready to get back in my car.
I'm going to be out there clocking the 4 hours, though. See how long it takes for somebody to get back.
Aaron wants to drive one of the trucks, but you need a CDL. I'm sorry, Aaron, you can't do that. Maybe you could do the school.
Next year. That'll be my goal for this year.
Well, you could do the school parking lots because that's off of the public street. So you can follow the school parking lots. Maybe.
Okay.
What astonished me about your study was thinking about the hidden cost to us of reliability issues and downtime. And that there is a factor here that is causing, I think, these kinds of unnecessary expenses to the town. It seems to me, my fellow selectmen, that since we are doing our best to budget for known future expenses, we need to become more sophisticated with our fleet as well. These are things that we know we're going to have expenses. And so as challenging as it is to us, why don't we start a more sophisticated anticipation of these known future expenses? So I think this is the right time to be thinking strategically about this.
Right. Well, I do think it's worth mentioning that when John took over the department, one of the first things he did was throw up a flag and say, we need to take some action on the vehicles. And I know that he worked closely with Stacy to develop a replacement schedule and to transition into a leasing strategy, which does set up that natural turnover. And we've been doing that now for a couple of years. So I do think this is good data for us to have, but it would be a mistake to suggest that the town hasn't done anything over the last couple of years. I think, John, what have you been sitting in the hot seat for, 4 years now?
Right. So then over the past 4 years, we've replaced 16 vehicles, I'm pretty sure. So I think that's quite a bit more than prior years. So finance has really done a good job putting the lease program together so that we could get caught up and just get to a better place. And I think this report shows that we still have more work to do in that regard.
Right. But I mean, we were for a period of time with this replacement strategy, know that we were sticking our finger in the dike, that we it's disappointing to see engines blow up in some of the lighter weight vehicles. That's, that's a different, I think, discussion, but yeah.
I think the thing that was interesting to those of us on CIP, Gene Fitzgerald was on one of our last meetings and threw out the idea that we may be discussing in our budget meetings, our budget workshops around the use of a special appropriation out of the undesignated fund balance. So something we may want to talk about in a subsequent meeting, but how maybe to escalate this as opposed to retaining it just inside of CIP.
Yeah, I think there'll be a lot of discussion about how we want to tackle this, how we want to ease ourselves into it. Do we want to ease ourselves into it? Do we just want to take the leap? And I also think it's worth having a policy discussion too about do we want to set some goals to transition over our fleet to electric possibly in the future? And, if we're going to be making some large investments and, I don't know what the opportunities would be for heavy vehicles like diesel engines and things like that. But I know the state's making a big push to start converting public vehicles, moving over to electric. And maybe we as a town might want to start making those types of commitments going forward as a policy. But there's going to have to be a whole cost versus benefit analysis. Electric would require infrastructure investment. But there's also a bunch of grants available right now that can match, or pay for parting up to 50%, I think was some of the information that was sent to me last week. So I think as we move forward to decide how we want to do this, maybe part of that's also setting a long-term policy goal of trying to, convert ourselves into greener technology. So we'll have more discussion on this going forward. And this is a great foundation to work from. So I appreciate your work, Bob and John, because this was a lot of the heavy lifting was done by John and his staff, providing information and working closely to make sure that, they had everything he needed to pull the report together. So more to come on this topic. Is everybody good with questions for Bob? Can we move on? Yeah. Okay, great. All right. Well, thank you so much. Appreciate it. And
Thanks, Bob.
Thank you.
Good seeing you again.
and I think our next item on the agenda involves John. So just hang on for a minute. Can I get a motion to discuss and take action to approve awarding the bid for the removal of brush, stumps, logs, and woods at the bulky waste site? Can I get a motion?
So moved.
So moved. Second.
Okay, great. So basically, this is just the awarding a contract for a special appropriation we did a few months ago for $35,000 as it relates to Tropical Storm Isaias. The good news is the final bid came in significantly lower at around $19,500 versus the $35,000 special appropriation. So that's money you saved the town. Second of all, the other good news is that the emergency declaration for that storm was approved finally. So we can expect to get 75% refunded from FEMA for this expense. So that's all good news. And I was just stunned to see the broad array of pricing that went from, $19,500 to $300 and something thousand for one project. I just am stunned by that. So I don't know if anybody has any questions for John on this. You just went to the lowest bidder.
Right.
Okay. All right. So all in favor of awarding the bid for the removal of brush, stumps, logs, and bulky waste site to, I forgot the name, Green.
The Good Earth.
Good Earth.
The Good Earth Tree Care, Inc.
To the Good Earth Tree Care, Inc. Say aye.
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 Okay, great. All right, good work. And it's nice.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Coming in, getting a lot of competition and coming in lower than what we anticipated. So love to see that. All right, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Okay, next item on the agenda is discuss proposed project from the Madison Diversity and Inclusion Committee to create a pride crosswalk at an intersection on a town road.
So moved.
Hi.
All right, hello. So Cindy, I know you had submitted a proposal to the Police Commission.
Yes.
And they recommended that in areas of crosswalk, that's typically they just determine safety issues, but they don't aesthetics. They don't opine on aesthetics.
Yes,
so
exactly.
I know. So that it's more really a policy issue for our board. So do you have a presentation, or you just want to walk through what your proposal is?
Yeah, I don't have a presentation.
Okay.
I did send over an email earlier just with some points that I wanted to discuss. So I am a member of the Madison Diversity Inclusion Committee, and we have been throughout the year trying to come up with ways to, be able to show our community that we are very supportive of the LGBT, I can never even say this, the LGBTQ plus community. And one of the things that we discussed was Pride Crosswalk. So I volunteered to do some research, and at that point I was directed to the police commission. And luckily when I talked to them, it was wonderful because they had just approved a bunch of crosswalks, and they just wanted me to move forward with you guys to discuss whether or not this would be something that we would be able to do in town.
Okay. I do have, I think I dropped a picture into my, let me see if I can screen share, just so people kind of understand the concept,
Yeah,
because it's a little obscure if you're at home listening to this.
definitely. Sorry, I didn't know with the police
No, that's
commission,
okay.
I
I'll
wasn't
just
even
put
on
this up.
video, so.
This was what was in your memo,
Yes.
right? And then
Yep.
where is this?
This is in Middletown.
Middletown, okay.
Yep, and there's been several cities in Connecticut that have already done this. Simsbury's done one. So there's been a lot of cities, and it's been very well received. So it would be wonderful to be able to have whether temporary or permanent crosswalk approved somewhere on a town road, because it would have to be a town road. It couldn't be one of the state roads, or that's totally different approval, I'm told.
Okay, well, I appreciate you bringing this forward to the board. I don't, does anybody have any questions?
No, but I mean, we're going to discuss this. I had some thoughts.
Yep.
So when I saw this show up on the agenda, I started to do some research on my own, and not surprisingly, a lot of communities are either doing this or considering doing it. Because it is related to safety, communities are going and taking that next step and developing guidelines on how to do this in a way that is meaningful for the community, but also is a safe crossing for pedestrians, because we don't want to create unsafe conditions. So I'm thinking that so for instance, I didn't look at Middletown, but Norwalk, for instance, has a policy on what they call artistic crosswalks. So they're thinking in the broader scope of it. And then some bigger cities, Seattle has one, San Antonio, Texas has one. And I was thinking that, we already have a committee in place that is concerned with bike and pedestrian safety. Yeah. And it seems like a natural fit for that group to do a survey of what other towns, what other policies have been enacted, and make a recommendation back to us such that we can safely approve something like this, help them identify a location that is likely, and make sure that we're not running afoul of any requirements that we might have, statutory requirements we might have around crosswalks. So I really see it as a way to getting to yes. How do we get to the point where we can say, yes, we support this? I think in concept, we probably already do.
Yeah, that sounds wonderful. I know that when I spoke with Chief Drum, he had suggested after this doing something with the town engineer. On the same call that I was on with the police commission, the pedestrian and bicycle safety people were on also, and they seemed very excited to give us one of the crosswalks that they had already had approved. So I think that's a very logical step to find out the specifics that would make it safe, because that's really important also.
Yeah. So
it does sort of beg the question, though, gang, about precedent, in terms of, one group, being offered a crosswalk. Does that then open the door to other groups? And maybe that's a very good thing, back to the point of being a diverse community and offering opportunities for different clubs or groups. I think it's sort of back to your point, Bruce, about guidelines, right? We need to have some safety guidelines. Maybe there's participation guidelines. Maybe it's a time frame guideline. I don't know what the answer is, but.
So I absolutely agree, Scott. I think that a good policy allows us to not only allow this particular type of crosswalk, but another sponsor, that comes forward. Obviously it would have to be at a different place. We're not going to let people peek over each other's crosswalks in the middle of the night. But yes, Scott, I think you're right. If we do say to one group, under these conditions it's allowed, then we have to make those same conditions available to other groups that might be interested. So.
Yeah, I echo what Bruce was talking about. I think, just for practical purposes, we need to have a policy because it's government.
Absolutely.
We always have to have a policy. And, and I thought, my thought was, and I think it's great, you actually started doing research, Bruce, and if you worked with them to come up with this policy, and my thinking was like, what if we designated one in town as kind of our artistic crosswalk, right? And so maybe, it would be, every 2 or 3 years, different groups can petition to, have their message there, and we would have like a review committee or whatever, make a selection, or maybe the same thing would stay for 10 years because no one else would want to do it. But, it just provides a way to express. Different groups have an opportunity, then we identify one rather than having it kind of like constantly be coming up throughout different locations. So there's just an idea. But these are all things we could, as a board, talk about, and maybe, having that. And then I was curious, like, well, what is the expense involved? And so I did speak to our public works director a little bit about the expense issue. Typically, these cost a couple $1,000s to paint, but if this is going to be something using different colors, and they'd have to make sure that the safety, concerns were addressed and whatever. So all the things that government makes you have to work through and figure out. But I think it sounds like there's a lot of, openness to explore this further.
And definitely have people who have pledged to cover the cost of it. So that should not be something that prohibits it from getting done. Whatever it costs, we will get the money for. But yeah, I think that all your ideas are wonderful.
Yeah. Okay. So maybe what we'll do is, if you want to take it to the Bicycle and Pedestrian Committee, and I'm happy to send them like an email just outlining the different things to think about, and they could recommend to us what a policy could be.
Okay.
All these different ideas, and then we can talk about it here at the board level again and get something going forward. Okay.
Okay. I think that sounds wonderful. Definitely would want it to be safe. That's very important.
Well, and also I think to Scott's point too, good policy is flexible, and and we have to think of all the different angles that can come at this as well. So,
I agree.
So Peggy, I think that I would strongly, urge the BPAC to not seek to reinvent the wheel, to do a quick survey of what's out there in existing town policies, and then incorporate the parts that are going to fit Madison well. Some might call that plagiarism. I call it efficient government.
Well, I mean, even just that example of Middletown, let's go find out what the policy is around it and save that.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, and I like the concept of artistic crosswalks. I just think that is a really nice positive message to have in our community. So,
and maybe part of this work is an inventory of crosswalks that would be suitable for this.
Yeah, definitely. I think they said they had 7 to 11 crosswalks that had just been approved, that they could give us a list to show you. And obviously you could pick whichever one you felt was best.
Okay, great. All right. Well, thank you for bringing this forward to us, and we'll continue to
Very cool.
Okay.
All right. Thank you. Have a nice day.
Cindy, good to see you.
Bye. You too. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay. All right. So moving on to, we are on item 11 now. Discuss and take action to call a public hearing on Monday, March 22nd, 2021 at 6:30 p.m. via Zoom to hear comment on the Madison 1 CDBG Small Cities Grant Project at the Concord Meadows Apartments.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, Lauren, do you want to give a quick overview of this?
So this is something that we need to do for the state in order to close out the funding that we received for the first year of the CDBG grant, which provided upgrades at the Concord Meadows apartment complex for energy efficient windows and also handicap accessibility in the bathrooms of the units. So in order for the state to know that we really used their money appropriately, even though we've given them, 7,000 papers that say that, they need to have a public hearing, and it will allow the public, but also the residents to come and say what they think about the projects that have been completed.
Okay, any questions? All right, all in favor of approving a public hearing, a call to a public hearing on Monday, March 22nd, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, great. All right. Number 12.
Making stuff happen tonight.
Pardon?
So we're making stuff happen tonight.
Yes, we are. It took a long time to get up to this point though, right? So item number 12, discuss and take action to approve the following resolution. Be it resolved that in support of its prior action on March 9th, 2020 and April 27th, 2020, the Board of Selectmen hereby approves sending the year 2 extension of the lease modification and extension agreement between the Town of Madison and Our Lady of Mercy Preparatory Academy of Madison for a period of August 1st, 2021 through July 31st, 2022 to town meeting in accordance with the action taken by the Board of Finance on April 29th, 2020. Can I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, and just for the public, this is basically just a required vote that we would need to do to send the 1-year extension for the lease for our Island Avenue School, 1 more year, and then this would go to town meeting.
So do we have can we just get a quick overview of what that town meeting is going to look like?
Yes, Lauren is prepared to walk us through that.
And when is the town meeting? Does it give it? Is there an actual date?
So that's the next item, which would be February 18th. It's the day I
Oh, good.
emailed you guys
Okay.
on last week.
Perfect.
Yeah,
Perfect.
and we're
Thank
getting
you.
a lot done at that town meeting, so it
Yeah.
better work. Go ahead, Lauren, if you want to just walk through kind of the process.
Yeah, so it's very similar to an in-person town meeting, except obviously that it's online, but the check-in is going to be the same. So it will be set up as a Zoom meeting, not a Zoom webinar like we're on now. It'll be a meeting where everyone is an equal participant. That means you and the public. What will happen is that we will start the check-in process prior to the meeting. So between 6:15 and 6:30, the town clerk, myself, and the 2 registrars will log into the meeting. And then everyone else is going to be held in a waiting room. And what we'll do is we will go one by one of everyone who is in the waiting room, and they are going to have to show their license next to their camera with their face. The town clerk and the registrar will confirm that the face on the screen matches the license being held next to it, and then that the name and address on the license corresponds to the voter records. The town clerk and the registrar will then give me the okay to move that person from the waiting room into the meeting. We will check people in until there is no one left. And at some point, which generally we do in person as well, is if it's 7 o'clock and there's still a line out the door at Polson, we'll continue checking people in for 5 minutes just to get everybody in. And we'll do the same thing here. But depending on how busy it is, if it gets to 7:05 and we've got everyone checked in, even if someone tries to join at 7:10, they will not be counted, which is exactly what we do when the meeting is in person. So once everyone is brought in from the waiting room to the meeting, the town clerk and I will certify the number of people who were checked in by the registrar and determine whether or not that number reaches quorum. If it does not reach quorum, obviously the items pass. And if it does reach quorum, then we have to turn the meeting over to the moderator and then open up those items for a vote. In Zoom, there is a polling feature. So what we'll do is the items will appear exactly as they're going to appear in your legal notice, and then we will do them through the poll one at a time. Every person who has been registered to vote will be allowed 1 vote, and then Nancy and I will review the results and announce whether or not the item has passed.
One other thing, Lauren, I know there was a lot of discussion about people who don't have access to the internet, and there are going to be accommodations where they can contact the senior center and they will try to hook them up in some capacity that they can log on.
Yeah, what we'll do is we'll put something in the instructions on the website that says if you have limitations, that involved access to the internet or access to the Zoom, to call me. And then depending on how many calls we get, how many people need help, we'll set something up.
Lauren, is there any special provision for two people who Zoom in on the same device?
So that's going to be one of the caveats, is that every person who is attending the meeting has to be on their own device, because what happens is when they're moved in and you know, they can only have one vote. So if there are two people in a household that both are eligible to cast a vote on the poll, they're going to need to be on their own device and logged in as themselves.
Because this is anonymous voting. So it can't be like, why can't we both be on the screen, you know? So, and this is the procedure that was used in other towns, correct?
Yes.
And so we're kind of mirroring what they've done. And this was kind of got the blessing, I guess, of Hartford, so to speak, for virtual town meetings.
Yep.
So it'll be interesting. But hopefully, we have 3 things on the agenda, it'll be a good practice run to see how to manage it through this. In addition, we have new registrars that were sworn in. So this will be an opportunity for them to learn the process. So, we hope for the public's patience if you do decide to attend the town meeting, that, it's the first time doing this, as well as new registrars. So it might be a bit of a cumbersome process in the beginning.
Might I suggest that the lease vote be the third vote of the night and not the first vote? So that we don't run into the issue of somewhere during the meeting running out of quorum.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I'm
So
guessing that's
maybe we need to change the motion then on number 13. Do they have to go in order with what? I mean, we're not on that one, so when we get to that, we'll talk about it. But maybe we change the call of the town meeting. That's a good point, Bruce.
I would hate to see that, people vote on it and then leave, and then somewhere in the middle lose a quorum, and the registrars are trying to figure that all out. When did that happen?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Good point. Any questions in terms of the lease extension? I know that we've ad nauseum discussed the Island Avenue lease over the last 12 months. So any other questions before taking a vote? Okay. All right. So all in favor of approving the resolution as read in the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, great. All right, so then moving on to number 13, and discuss and take action to, or should I amend it now?
It doesn't matter the way we list them in this.
It doesn't? This isn't because it's calling the special town meeting. Can we just change the order in the notices?
It's not specified in the agenda. Yeah, I don't think it matters.
Okay, so discuss and take action to approve calling a special town meeting on February 18th, 2021 via Zoom to approve the following matters. Number one, the year 2 extension of the lease modification and extension agreement between the town of Madison, Our Lady of Mercy Preparatory Academy of Madison for a period of August 1st, 2021 through July 31st, 2022. Number 2, granting a tax abatement to the Caleb Foundation and Hope Partners in accordance with section 20.3 of the Town of Madison Code of Ordinances. And number 3, modifications to the current tax incentive policy adopted by the Board of Selectmen on May 29th, 2018, as recommended by the Economic Development Commission.
So moved.
Okay, you have a second? Okay. All right, great. So, and these are the other 2 items, obviously, are things that we voted on in previous meetings. So this is just a setting the town meeting. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, great. So we'll have our town meeting. And maybe it'll be our last virtual town meeting. If everything goes well, we'll be out of this thing in a couple months. Okay, so item number 14. Can I get a motion to approve or accept with regret the resignations of Melanie Clark from the Board of Assessment Appeals and Richard Robinson from the Board of Assessment Appeals?
So moved with regret and appreciation for how much time they put in.
A second? Okay, great. Yes, thank you for your service. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you for your service very much. And it looks like we're going to have to be filling some vacancies on the Board of Assessment Appeals. So, all right, item number 14. I don't think there was any abatements. Was there refunds?
15.
In the packet.
No, I didn't get any.
Okay. All right, great. So, number 16, citizens' comments.
Still got a few out there.
There's no one with their hand raised.
You have to
Okay.
raise your hand to ask us a question.
Okay. All right. We'll move on then. All right. And item number 17. I'd like to make a motion to move into executive session and invite Floyd Dugas and Lauren Rhines. Do I need to read off what we're doing for the litigation update? I don't have to read all that, do I?
No, it's on the agenda and it'll be in the minutes.
Okay. Can I get a motion in a second?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. And is there anybody else coming with Floyd, or is it just Floyd?
I believe it's just Floyd.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, great. So for the public, this is going into an executive session now, and the recording will be suspended while we're in executive session. Thank you.